Do you ever think to yourself, man, I love buying things on eBay, but you know what would make it better? Not knowing the actual condition of the things for sale and having no recourse if it's broken? Well, you're in luck because that's just what you'll get when you use the little-known auction site shopgoodwill.com. See, Goodwill has this handy auction site where they post anything that has more value than the 99-cent teacups and mountains of VCRs. I was recently browsing through and found there's quite a bit of older Mac computers for sale, everything from PowerPC models, MacBook Pros, iMacs, and even this 2006 Mac Pro. I wasn't actually looking for one of these, but when I saw how cheap it was going for, I decided to throw a bid and see what happened. I've always liked the case design despite how I feel about Apple or OS X, so I thought it would be cool to have one of these to mess around with. The starting price was only $29.99 and I set my max bid to $35 and let Jesus take the wheel. A couple of days later, I was frantically refreshing the page as it counted down, and someone bid it up to the $35 max bid I had, but backed off after that. After a few more seconds, I was the proud owner of someone else's garbage. The computer looked pretty good in the pictures, with only some surface scratches and nothing major, so I was excited to finally see it in person. About 5 days later, a giant box is dropped off by FedEx, and at first the packaging looked pretty good, but there was a surprise waiting for me once I unwrapped it. The bottom quote-unquote handle was totally bent and broken away from the case. It was actually worse when I opened it, but I was able to bend it back into shape a little bit. When I looked into this, it's super common for these Macs to have this problem in shipping, and there's only a couple of documented fixes, and mostly the responses were get another computer, which is a little bit of a foreshadowing in my case. So my plan was to disassemble this case completely and remove the outer handles, which are just held on by screws. At this point, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Before I started to take it apart, I did confirm it was all in working order and everything seems good. I had two different drives going, one with Lion, the last officially supported OS, and the other one with the modded El Capitan that works on these older Mac Pros. At this point in the build, I was planning on upgrading it with 16 gigs of RAM, an R9 280 GPU that I had kicking around, and upgrading the processors to the two quad-core Xeons. This would have put it into the realm of usability for the modern days, but it was just more for fun. Now I mentioned how people said to just get another case instead of trying to fix the current one, and literally just a couple days after getting the first one, I was browsing Craigslist and came across an ad for an identically spec'd Mac Pro with all the accessories and a 20-inch cinema display. He had it posted for $100 and it had already been up for like 2 weeks, so I figured the seller might be open to a lowball offer, and I asked if he'd take $75, to which he replied, "Sure, when can you come get it?" I went out the next day and now I was suddenly the owner of two Mac Pros. The second one was in way better shape, obviously not bent or anything, but the overall condition was almost perfect and everything was in full working order. This is what gave me the confidence to do the ATX mod on the old one. There's plenty of documented builds out there to have as a guide, so I decided to go this route, but first I needed to get this thing fixed the best I could. Okay, enough backstory, let's get this thing stripped down and try not to ruin it any more than it already is. Right off the bat, I love how easy this thing is to open and access the internals. It's pretty much as easy to upgrade as any normal desktop PC, and a far cry from the Apple we know today. Most of the parts came out pretty easy. The RAM boards just pull out with no tools required. The GPU is also as simple as removing the bracket and popping it out. These screws right here would not come out no matter how hard I tried. The one on the left kept spinning due to the standoff coming loose in the case, and the other one just stripped the more I tried to turn it. Drastic measures were required to get these out. It's pretty funny taking a Dremel to a computer that once cost over $2,000. Now that all that's out of the way, I can remove the power cables and the logic board. Here's all the screws that hold the two pieces together. Some of these were pretty tricky to remove, but I was able to get them all in the end, but you better believe that not all of them will make their way back into the case. Okay, this was my first attempt at separating the two pieces, and it was pretty difficult. At this point, I wasn't aware of how easy it actually was. If I just stepped back and looked at it for 2 seconds instead of trying to brute force my way through it. Now that we have the core removed, we can get a better look at the damage. The outer piece attaches with these threaded inserts, and the damage caused these to break off into the case. My first idea was to epoxy them back into place, then screw it all back together. I decided to use everyone's favorite engine block repairing epoxy, JB Weld. I'm sure the quick version will do just fine. I tried a few different methods to get this bent back into place, and the thing that ended up working the best was just using my hands and a block of wood. I got it pretty close, and at this point I figured once the screws were in, it would just pull the bend and make it look pretty straight. So here's a before shot. You can see that it's not even touching the tabletop in the spot where the damage was. So it needed quite a bit of bending to get back into place and make it stable. And here's after I messed with it. You can see that now it's all touching even though there's still like a ripple in it. But like I mentioned before, I assumed that putting the screws back in would help this pull it and make it look straight. I even thought ahead to take a wire wheel to the spots where I'd be epoxying those inserts back on to hopefully give it a better chance at holding. One thing I didn't anticipate was that these inserts were kind of like puzzle pieces and only fit perfectly into the spot they came out of. I spent way too much time trying to get these into the right place, and I think I got them pretty good, and then I went to town, hoping this stuff would hold well after it cured. 24 hours later, I was pretty confident that these were actually going to hold well and they were going to be in there for good, so I decided to go ahead and start reassembling the case. Please note, I still hadn't figured out the easy way to join these two pieces together and struggled with this for a while. Not quite as bad as taking it apart, but still, it wasn't easy like it should have been. It's hung up on these ones right now. Oh, got it. Okay. Once I got it back together, I immediately noticed that two of those inserts broke off already, and the other ones came off as soon as I tried to screw them in. I'm not sure if this was due to not enough surface area for the JB Weld, I didn't apply it well enough, or if it was just a bad idea to use the quick version, which has that fast cure time. Whatever it was, this didn't work at all. Since it didn't work the first time, my plan B was just be an idiot and throw more epoxy at it and attach the two pieces permanently. I figured I could just apply it with the pieces still together and get something that would hold. I put some tape down to try and keep the mess down, but this was useless. I clamped it down and somehow thought, well, this is good enough. The next day I took off the clamps and, surprise, it didn't hold one bit. And even if it did, I applied it so poorly I don't think the door would have been able to fit in there correctly. So there's only one option. Remove all the epoxy and reapply it properly, this time using the normal full strength stuff. So I removed all traces of the old epoxy and then sanded it all so it had a nice rough surface for the new stuff to stick to and grab a better hold. So the full strength epoxy has a way longer cure time, but it's also a lot stronger than the quick version. So this is what I should have used in the first place. I just needed to take my time and apply this correctly, and it should work out just fine. So here it is applied. I tried to make sure to only put it in areas that would be covered by the panel that I'm sticking to it. That way there was no cleanup or anything, and this ended up working out pretty good. This time, thankfully, it did hold and it does feel pretty strong. I pulled on it with a bit of force and couldn't get it to move, so it's definitely on there for good. So the case door fits fine, and overall it looks better. It's not perfect, but it's stable, and since this is the back, it won't be too noticeable. So here it is. As my grandpa used to say, it's a 10-footer. Honestly, it isn't too bad and it is solid, but I figured if I was going to go with the full ATX mod, I might as well go all the way out and paint the case and add what will probably be a pretty controversial option, a case window. Stay tuned for the next part of the mod, and let's hope I don't ruin this thing in the process. Thanks for watching the video. Feel free to comment on how I ruined a perfectly good Mac Pro or how you think the case windows are dumb, and please consider subscribing. Until next time, see you then.